The night the staircase first appeared, the air itself seemed to bleed. Moonlight fractured against the ancient boarding school's windows, spilling crimson shadows across the walls. Evelyn Harper stood at the threshold, her breath fogging in the cold, the sound of distant laughter echoing through the deserted halls. It wasn't playful, it was hollow, hungry, as if the building itself were remembering something it should have forgotten. The old legends whispered of steps that rose only after midnight, glowing like blood and leading nowhere mortal. Evelyn told herself it was only a story, but the darkness was waiting, and it knew her name. The sun was a fading ember in the sky as I stood before the towering iron gates of the boarding school. The structure loomed like a relic from another era, its Gothic spires clawing at the bruised clouds overhead. My suitcase felt impossibly heavy in my hand, though the weight was nothing compared to the knot tightening in my chest. This place was supposed to be my refuge, a chance to escape the fractured chaos of my family life. Yet standing here, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into something far older and darker than I'd imagined. The grounds were eerily silent, save for the crunch of gravel beneath my worn boots. I inhaled deeply, the cold air sharp and biting, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and ancient wood. A few students lingered near the entrance, their faces pale and guarded as they stole glances my way. I recognized none of them, but I imagined their thoughts. Newcomer, outsider, someone who would soon learn the rules whispered in shadows and half-truths. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere thickened. Candle chandeliers flickered against stone walls draped in faded tapestries. The murmur of voices ebbed and flowed like a restless tide. I found a vacant seat at the long dining table, my fingers tightening around the edge as snippets of conversation brushed against me. "You heard about the staircase?" A whisper reached my ears, barely audible but charged with a strange urgency. "Only comes out after midnight," another voice replied, low and wary. "Those who climb it, they don't come back." I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. It sounded like a ghost story, a cruel joke to scare freshmen into obedience. Yet the tremble in their voices suggested something more, an unspoken dread lurking beneath the surface. Over the next few days, the school settled into a rhythm both familiar and unsettling. Lessons marched on, but beneath the routine, a current of unease pulsed. I learned the names of a few classmates, Marcus Hale, tall and skeptical, with sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything with quiet suspicion. Leela Chen, rebellious and fierce, her gaze burning with a restless defiance. They both intrigued and unsettled me in equal measure. One evening, as the clock in the hall tower chimed the hour of midnight, I lay awake in my dormitory. The shadows around me deepened, the silence broken only by a faint, distant sound, laughter. It was light, almost playful, yet carried an echo of something hollow and lost. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to catch the source. The halls were empty, or so I told myself, but the laughter lingered, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. The next night, I found myself drawn toward the staircase at the far end of the west corridor. It was barely visible in the muted moonlight, its steps cloaked in a shimmering crimson hue that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I paused, breath shallow, feeling the weight of countless unseen eyes. A shadow flickered near the staircase, just a glimpse, but it was enough to ignite a fire of questions within me. Later, I met Mr. Whittaker, the caretaker, a man whose face was creased with lines that spoke of countless secrets. His eyes held a warning I couldn't ignore as he muttered of dangers best left alone. Yet his words only deepened my resolve. If this staircase was real, if it held the key to the strange disappearances whispered about in the halls, I needed to know. That night, as the clock struck midnight once more, I sat by my window, staring out at the darkness beyond. The crimson glow seemed to beckon, its promise both terrifying and irresistible. I was no longer just a newcomer. I was a seeker, caught between the fragile hope of understanding and the encroaching shadow of dread. The staircase was waiting, and so was the darkness. The story of the Crimson Staircase had only just begun to unravel, and I was already entangled in its haunting embrace. What secrets hid behind those blood-red steps? What fate awaited those who dared to climb? Each whispered rumor was a thread pulling me deeper into a nightmare I was determined to face, no matter the cost. As I closed my journal that night, a single thought echoed. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. The night settled over the ancient boarding school like a dense, suffocating shroud, cloaking every hallway in shadows that seemed to breathe with a quiet, sinister life. I sat alone in the common room, the flickering candlelight casting elongated, dancing shapes across the worn wooden walls. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the swaying branches of the towering trees, their skeletal limbs scratching against the stone windows like ghostly fingers. My eyes were fixed on the clock above the fireplace, its hands creeping inexorably toward midnight. There was a peculiar dread in the air tonight, a shift, subtle yet undeniable, that whispered promises of revelations and threats alike. The rumors I had heard on my first day clawed at the edges of my mind, refusing to let me find peace. The Crimson Staircase, the whispered legend that surfaced only under the shroud of night, between the fragile hours when the world seemed to hold its breath, was no longer just a story told in hushed voices. It was becoming a tangible presence in my life, an obsession that gnawed relentlessly at my curiosity and sanity. As the clock struck 12, a distant laughter trickled through the corridors, a sound both childlike and chillingly hollow. It echoed from somewhere unreachable, bouncing off the stone walls and seeping into my bones. The laughter was not joyful. It was a haunting melody of innocence lost, of joy twisted into despair. I shivered despite the warmth of the room, my heart pounding in sudden, frantic rhythm. Unable to resist, I rose and crept toward the hallway, the candle sputtering in my trembling hand. The corridor stretched before me, a tunnel swallowed by darkness, yet as I stepped forward, the shadows began to shift. From the depths of the gloom, a faint crimson glow began to pulse, faint at first, then brighter and more insistent. My breath caught in my throat as the Crimson Staircase emerged, a spectral structure of impossible beauty and terrible menace. Its steps seemed carved from blood itself, the color shifting and swirling like living flame. I reached out hesitantly, my fingers tingling with a cold fire as if the staircase was alive, breathing, waiting. A sudden noise behind me made me whirl around. Marcus stood there, eyes wide with disbelief and concern. "Evelyn," he said, voice low and urgent, this isn't real. You can't let it consume you." I wanted to argue, to tell him that what I saw was as real as the beating of my heart, but the words caught in my throat. His skepticism was a tether to sanity I wasn't sure I could hold on to. Yet, the staircase beckoned, its deep red steps promising answers and horrors alike. Before I could respond, a shadow darted past us, a slender figure with sharp eyes and a defiant stance. Lila Chen, always the rebel, was slipping away toward the forbidden wing, her silhouette swallowed by darkness. Her reckless curiosity was a spark that threatened to ignite the fragile balance we clung to. That night, as I lay awake in my cold dormitory bed, the laughter echoed again, mingling with the beating of my own heart. The Crimson Staircase was no longer just a legend. It was a secret waiting to be unraveled, a nightmare dressed in the guise of a dream. And I was caught between fascination and fear, drawn deeper into the abyss with every passing moment. The midnight secrets of the school had begun to unravel, and I was powerless to turn away. Questions swirled like mist. What was the staircase's purpose? Why did it appear only after midnight? And what terrible fate awaited those who dared to climb it? My hands trembled as I reached for my journal, the only refuge where I could try to make sense of the growing darkness. The night stretched before me, endless and merciless, and I knew that once the Crimson Staircase appeared, nothing would ever be the same again. But even as dread settled in my chest, a small, fragile flame of resolve flickered within me. I would uncover the truth. I had to, for the sake of those lost, for the echoing laughter, and for the shadows that threatened to consume us all. The school's nocturnal rhythm was no longer a mystery, it was a summons, and I was answering. As the final seconds of midnight slipped away, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. The Crimson Staircase pulsed softly in the darkness, a siren call drowning out reason. My journey had only just begun, and the night was far from over. The air in the dormitory that night was unusually still, as if the very walls of the ancient boarding school were holding their breath. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the worn quilt barely keeping the chill at bay. Across the room, Nina Brooks, my classmate, and one of the few people I dared to trust since arriving, shifted uneasily beneath her covers. Her eyes were wide and alert, reflecting the dim glow of the lantern we kept on the shared nightstand, a small rebellion against the darkness that seemed to seep into every corner since the rumors began. "You don't really believe those stories, do you?" Nina whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking of the old wooden beams above us. I hesitated. The stories about the Crimson Staircase had been circulating since the first night I arrived, whispered behind closed doors and in hushed tones between frightened students. The staircase that appeared only after midnight, glowing with a sinister red hue, a stairway to nowhere, or worse, to oblivion. "I don't know what to believe," I admitted, my fingers tightening around the journal I'd started keeping. "But I can't ignore what's happening." Outside, the clock in the main hall began its slow, inevitable chime toward midnight. Each toll seemed to echo through the hollow corridors, marking the time until the staircase would materialize again. The promise of silence shattered by a faint, distant sound, laughter, high-pitched and eerie, drifting through the shadows like a ghostly melody. "Did you hear that?" Nina's breath hitched, and I nodded, the hairs on my arms standing on end. The laughter was unmistakable, the same haunting echo we'd heard since the first night, always at dawn. It was said to be the laughter of those who had climbed the staircase and never returned. My heart pounded as we crept toward the window, peering out into the blackness beyond the school grounds. The moon hung low, casting a pale light that did little to pierce the darkness. And then, there it was, the staircase. Emerging slowly, step by step, from the depths of the shadowed hallway beneath the grand staircase in the main hall. Its crimson glow was otherworldly, pulsing softly like a heartbeat, inviting and terrifying all at once. I watched as Nina's eyes locked onto the apparition, a mixture of fear and fascination playing across her delicate features. "I have to see," she whispered, almost to herself, before turning away and pulling on her coat. "Nina, wait," I caught up to her in the hall, the cold air biting through my thin sweater. "It's not safe. We don't know what it is." She smiled, a sad, defiant curve of her lips. "I have to know the truth, Evelyn. If I don't, I'll never stop wondering." Before I could stop her, Nina stepped toward the glowing steps. The air around her seemed to shimmer, the silence deepening as the staircase beckoned. She took the first step, then another, her figure becoming swallowed by the crimson light. A sudden gust of icy wind swept through the hall, extinguishing the lantern and plunging me into darkness. I reached out, but there was nothing, only the echo of Nina's laughter, growing fainter with each passing second. I stood frozen, the shock rooting me to the spot. When the light from the staircase faded, so did Nina. No trace remained, no sign that she had ever been there, but the lingering, chilling sound of her laughter. Morning found the school in a state of uneasy silence. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Nina had run away, others whispered darker fates. The faculty offered vague reassurances, dismissing the disappearances as accidents or pranks gone wrong. But the truth was undeniable. The staircase was real, and it was deadly. Marcus Hale found me in the library later that day, his usual skeptical expression softened by concern. "I don't like this," he said quietly. "Whatever this staircase is, it's more than just a story." I nodded, clutching my journal tighter. The laughter haunted my dreams, a cruel reminder of what was lost and what awaited anyone who dared to climb those blood-stained steps. With Nina gone, the fragile veil of safety was torn away. I knew I couldn't turn back, not now. The staircase was a puzzle demanding to be solved, a darkness that had to be faced, and I was the only one who could do it. As night fell again, the crimson glow began to seep through the shadows. The staircase waited, patient and unyielding. And so did I, caught between fear and fascination, standing on the edge of a nightmare I could no longer ignore. The first disappearance had shattered the fragile peace within these ancient walls, but it was only the beginning. The library was quiet, save for the occasional creak of ancient floorboards and the soft rustling of pages. Evelyn's footsteps echoed lightly as she made her way between towering shelves, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows that seemed to dance with every flicker. Her heart thrummed with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Here, away from the prying eyes of other students, she hoped to find an ally. Marcus Hale was seated at a heavy oak table, head bent over a thick volume, his brow furrowed in concentration. Seeing her approach, he looked up, his sharp eyes meeting hers with an inquisitive glint. "Marcus," Evelyn began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to talk to you about the staircase." He raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "The staircase? You're serious about that?" Evelyn nodded, clutching her journal tightly. "It's real, and it's dangerous. Nina's gone. I heard her laughter this morning, but she's not here. Something's wrong." "I can feel it." Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. "You know I'm not one for ghost stories, Evelyn, but if you're this worried, I'll listen." Relief washed over her. "Thank you. I don't know what's happening, but I can't ignore it anymore." Their conversation stretched into the night, shadows growing longer as they pieced together rumors and sightings. Marcus's pragmatic nature clashed with Evelyn's growing fear, but a bond formed, a fragile alliance fueled by shared unease. Later, as they left the library, they encountered Leela Chen in the common room. Her presence was electric, bold, and unyielding. With a defiant glare, she challenged their cautious approach. "You're all too afraid. The staircase is the truth, and hiding from it won't help." Evelyn felt a swell of frustration. Leela's recklessness was as much a threat as the staircase itself. Yet, beneath the bravado, Evelyn sensed a kindred spirit, someone drawn by the same dark allure. The three stood by a window overlooking the school grounds, the first faint glow of the crimson staircase barely visible in the distance. The air was thick with dread and fascination, a silent promise of the trials to come. "We need to be careful," Marcus warned, his voice low. "This isn't just a game." Evelyn nodded, determination hardening within her. "We have to find out what's behind it, before more of us disappear." As the night deepened, the uneasy trio prepared to face the shadows lurking within the school's ancient walls, their fates intertwined with the enigmatic crimson staircase. The evening cast long shadows across the school's ancient library, where rows of books and archives lay untouched by time. Evelyn Harper's fingers brushed over the cold spines of forgotten records, heart hammering with a mixture of dread and hope. The air was thick with dust and silence, punctuated only by the faint scraping sound of her nails against leather-bound volumes. She had convinced Marcus Hale to join her in this clandestine search, their shared unease forging a fragile alliance. Marcus, ever the skeptic, had reluctantly agreed, the rational part of his mind battling the mounting evidence of the supernatural. "Look here," Evelyn whispered, her breath catching as she pulled a worn, leather-bound journal from the depths of a high shelf. The book was heavy, its cover cracked and stained, the scent of aged paper rising in the cool air like a ghost from the past. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing as he took in the faded gold lettering that spelled out a name, one none of the current students would recognize. They settled at a small wooden table beneath a flickering lamp, the dim light casting eerie patterns on the cracked walls. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she opened the journal, revealing pages filled with tightly packed handwriting, ink faded to a ghostly gray. The entries began innocuously enough, notes about school life, friendships, and mundane worries, but soon took a darker turn. Descriptions of strange noises in the night, glimpses of a glowing red staircase that appeared only after midnight, and a growing obsession with the spectral structure that seemed to beckon the writer deeper into its shadow. As Evelyn read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper, Marcus's skepticism wavered. The words painted a vivid picture of fear and isolation. The writer, a student who had vanished years ago under mysterious circumstances, chronicled encounters with a presence that seemed alive, an entity feeding on innocence and despair. The journal spoke of laughter echoing through empty halls, the same haunting sound Evelyn had come to dread. A particularly chilling entry described the writer's final night, standing before the crimson staircase, feeling an irresistible pull. The page ended abruptly, the ink smeared as if by trembling hands or tears. Evelyn's eyes darted to Marcus, searching for any sign of disbelief, but found only a grim seriousness that matched her own. This changes everything," Marcus muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We can't just dismiss it as folklore anymore." Their discovery deepened the mystery, revealing a legacy of silence and sorrow that had been carefully concealed by the school's authorities. It was clear the staircase was more than a haunting. It was a trap, a malevolent force that had claimed countless victims over the decades. But why and how remained obscured in layers of fear and forgotten pain. Determined to piece together the puzzle, Evelyn resolved to seek out more records, to understand the entity's nature, and find a way to protect those still caught in its grip. Yet the more she uncovered, the heavier the weight of the school's cursed past felt pressing down on her shoulders. Each revelation was a thread pulling her deeper into the crimson abyss. As they closed the journal, the distant echo of laughter floated faintly through the corridors outside, chilling them to the bone. The staircase was waiting, and with every secret unveiled, its grip tightened. Evelyn's resolve hardened, but the shadows around her whispered warnings she could no longer ignore. "We have to be ready," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the darkened hallway where the staircase would soon appear. "Because whatever's waiting up there, it's not done with us yet." The chapter ends with a heavy silence, the promise of uncovering more truths shadowed by the creeping dread of what lies beyond the crimson stairs. The shadows in my dorm room seemed to breathe with the flicker of the candle's flame, casting elongated shapes on the cracked walls that whispered secrets only the night could hold. I lay on my narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled up to my chin, but the chill that gnawed at my skin was not from the cold. It was something deeper, a sensation that settled under my ribs and refused to be soothed. As the clock hands crept past midnight, the world beyond my window slipped into a strange stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves against the ancient stone walls of the school. Sleep, when it finally came, did not offer the solace I had hoped for. Instead, it dragged me into a realm where memory and nightmare intertwined, each thread dyed in the unmistakable hue of crimson. I found myself standing in the ruins of my childhood home, but it was not as I remembered it. The walls bled a deep red, as if the very foundation was soaked in sorrow. The air was thick with the scent of iron and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed, a laughter both joyous and sinister. It was a sound I recognized, yet feared. It belonged to children, yet it carried a weight that no innocent mirth should bear. The crimson mist curled around my ankles, climbing higher with every hesitant step. I reached out, fingers brushing the vapor, cold and wet like morning dew, yet it left a stain, a vivid mark upon my skin that refused to fade. Memories flickered like broken film reels. The day my mother left, the silence that followed, the hollow ache of loneliness. But they were fragmented, twisted by the nightmare's hand, morphing into images of the staircase. The staircase that appeared only after midnight, pulsing with a life of its own. Suddenly, the scene shifted. I was no longer in the ruins, but in the school's playground, though it was warped beyond recognition. The swings swayed in a windless void, creaking softly like mournful voices. Crimson petals drifted down like rain, carpeting the ground in a blood-red blanket. Each petal whispered secrets, fragments of forgotten stories, and lost laughter that seemed to seep from the soil itself. I felt a presence behind me, a child, spectral and pale, her eyes glowing faintly with a crimson light that matched the petals. She beckoned silently, a finger pressed to her lips in a gesture of secrecy. Her gaze was both a mirror and a warning, reflecting my own fears and the innocence I had lost. Together, we approached a darkened hallway where the staircase awaited. Its steps throbbed like a heartbeat, each pulse resonating with a sinister rhythm that called to something deep within me. I wanted to turn away, to flee back to the safety of the waking world, but I was rooted in place. The child's eyes bore into mine, and in them, I saw the reflection of my own haunted past and the terrible inevitability of what lay ahead. The staircase was not just a structure. It was a gateway, a manifestation of all the pain, fear, and shattered dreams that had been buried beneath the school's ancient stones. I woke with a start, the echo of laughter still ringing in my ears, a sound both comforting and cruel. My chest heaved as I struggled to draw air, the weight of guilt pressing down like a stone. I thought of Nina, of Leela, of the others who had vanished, swallowed by the crimson abyss. Was I next? Or could I find a way to break the cycle that bound us all? The dawn's pale light spilled through the cracked window, casting long fingers of gold across the floor. For a moment, the nightmare retreated, but I knew it was only a reprieve. The staircase would return, and with it, the shadows of my childhood, darker, deeper, and more dangerous than ever before. I reached for my journal, my trembling hand tracing the familiar lines of ink and paper. Writing was my anchor, the fragile thread that kept me tethered to reality. As I put pen to paper, I vowed to confront the darkness, to unravel the secrets woven into the red-tinged fabric of my dreams. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the path was fraught with terror, but I would not turn away. Not this time, because to face the crimson staircase was to face myself, my fears, my memories, and the fragile flame of hope that still flickered in the depths of my soul.